Oman, in areas like Dubai and in Sharjah or the Northern Emirates. So there are similarities in doing business there. The similarities are more cultural. Yeah. But if you look at each regulatory environment and reimbursement environment, they are very different. And I mean, Zainab's got experience in North Africa. I have very little experience there. Yeah. So whether or not my UAE or Saudi or Oman experience would translate to North Africa remains to be seen. But as it relates to Mohammed's point about investing and about the liquidity and the willingness of people to loan money to make acquisitions, that's probably very similar across the Middle East and North Africa. But I believe that the way that you administer healthcare does change to some degree from geography to geography.
Zainab, a similar point to you. I mean, I in my experience of North Africa, the governments are different in a sense from what we could have typically in the Gulf states. I mean, is that your experience as well?
Yes, definitely. I couldn't agree more with Michael. I mean, there is definitely similarities between countries in the region, but there are also disparities when, we think about, there is a wide differential between the Gulf countries and the other nations in the Arab region and North Africa and also other African countries. And it also comes to, healthcare is really, really related to also, the ICT diffusion, differences in economic growth, and I would say, the income as measured by GDP. But definitely there are similarities, but the economic growth of each country will also have an impact on how healthcare is given and how healthcare is also, provided to citizens in terms of insurance policies. So for instance, in North Africa, in Morocco, it's being subsidized by the government, in Algeria and Tunisia as well, which is quite different than what's happening in the Gulf region. And I correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but, in terms of insurance policies, we're, the two regions are totally different.
Again, developing that a little bit further, because, I mean, all of you made some fantastic points which actually make my job much easier to feed into the next question. So, about the trends and developments that are taking place, both in the, if we can, I mean, this is a very, very blunt way of describing the Middle East and North Africa, but I think the new audience know what I mean by that. If I was to look at the governments, each government, be it a ruling family or be it an elected government or hybrids of both, would say that social infrastructure is one of their priorities, education, and healthcare. And then when you're looking at sovereign wealth funds, all of them would have in their top 5 investment sectors, healthcare. Are you seeing, therefore, I mean, Mohammed, come back to your point about you're seeing bigger deals, you're seeing more deals, you're seeing the market has great potential. What kind of sectors, trends and developments are you seeing that are driven by that underpinning of what the governments want as well?
I think if you go 10 years back, the governments, take Saudi as an example. Yep. The Ministry of Health in Saudi 10 years ago was building hospitals, was building infrastructure. Yep. And that has evolved to today. The Ministry of Health is looking to privatize healthcare provisioning in Saudi. This is a shift in the mindset. This is significant. Just to give a sense to the audience, the Ministry of Health constitutes more than 60% of healthcare expenditure in Saudi. The other 20% being semi-governmental. So between ministry and semi-government, it's 80%. When that starts to shift into the privatization, you would start to see players like us seeing the opportunity. Sovereign wealth funds are also looking to play a role alongside the private sector. Sometimes a bit too much, but they are playing a role in alongside the private sector. So in terms of sectors where they are interested in, I mean, just think of it from a sense of what's costing the government the most. Acute care beds are expensive, ICU beds are expensive, and they are needed. And as such, long-term care, extended care, chronic rehab, has become a vertical where we saw a big influx. I mean, Michael is one of the pioneers in this sector actually through Provita, which was a market being created in Abu Dhabi at that time. We got to know each other during that time actually. Cambridge today, which we own, is also one of the leaders in this sector. So I would say this is one of them. Another one where they're thinking is COVID has taught a lot. Thinking of pharma production, of life sciences, of basically vaccine manufacturing and drug manufacturing has also become a national need in our part of the world. And we've seen a lot of investments from the sovereign wealth funds in that direction.
Michael?
Fundamentally, to answer your question, yes. I mean, obviously, whether it's the ruling families, the sovereigns, the government, people do place a great emphasis on education and health for the citizens, not just for the passport holders, but just for all residents.
Yeah.
And what I've seen, particularly I've been in the Middle East since 2013, and I've seen a lot of evolution both in Saudi and in the UAE during that period of time. But the chasm that previously existed between the public sector and the private sector that gap has lessened over the last 2 years because of COVID. And I think that, to Mohammed's point, we are going to see a big push toward privatization. And I think that what the government saw both in Saudi and in the UAE during the COVID crisis is that in private healthcare, we did do a great job at supplementing the work that the government is doing. And if you look at the percent that's spent on the GDP, there's always a lot of focus on what Saudi and the UAE spend in relation to their larger government expenditures, but also look how well the UAE did during the COVID crisis.
Yeah.
We're talking about now we've got close to 80% of the population is vaccinated. We've done millions upon millions of PCR tests. We've had a very, very, very low incidence of hospitalization and death. And I think that that's a good model to show people that investing in a healthcare infrastructure and focusing on, lessening the chasm between public and private is to the benefit of the public. And it creates, it helps lessen the impact of a public health crisis, that the likes of which we've not seen in 100 years. But the UAE government and the Saudi government helped navigate that very well in the midst of a very horrible global pandemic.
Michael, let's come.
Sorry, I just wanted to agree to what Michael just said, and to add to it that this all is happening because the private and public are playing in tandem to a very large extent. It's not like completely separate. Especially during COVID, I'm sure the public sector was in discussion with the private in terms of service line integration, in terms of taking up some patients and what have you. So it's a continuous dialogue that's taking place in Abu Dhabi.
I wanted to come back to that point a little bit more because I think it'd be good to explore privatization, PPP type transactions and what that means for healthcare in the region. Zainab, do you recognize some of the things that Michael and Mohammed are saying about the interaction between the public sector and the private sector, and I suppose private sector including the insurance companies as well in your jurisdictions?
Absolutely. Well, if I talk about Morocco, until 2015, only doctors were permitted to own private clinics, but legislation passed, I think, by 2016 that removed this restriction and allowed both Moroccans and foreign investors to establish clinics. So today we see a lot of investments coming from abroad, from the UAE, from Europe, but also an increase in budget from the government's prioritizing public health. And at the same time giving more, I would say, more infrastructure to be able to attract more investments in the healthcare area.
That's helpful. Let's just develop that a little bit more about the sort of closing chasm. An example for me, I did a transaction about 8 years ago which required confirmations from the public sector. It's Abu Dhabi in this instance. The entity 8 years ago was throughout the UAE, essentially Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and Sharjah. And 8 years ago, it was a battle trying to get confirmations, trying to get processes moving with the public sector. we did a similar transaction about a year ago. It was a piece of cake. It was really well. Just say a little bit more about, I mean, this is the case in Morocco as well, how you see the attitude of the public authorities allowing the private sector, because I think people in the audience, both here physically and at home, would look at those opportunities. And in certain countries, you go in and you've got a battle, as we used to have, and arguably we still have sometimes in the UK as well with the National Health Service. And you can't do that. That's privatisation. You can't do that. Or you're making too much money, private equity, no. Are you seeing the same kind of, locking of horns, or as I've seen recently, that chasm that you're talking about completely destroyed and really moving in a way where they're working very much as partners?
That's an excellent question. Yeah. And actually, thanks for asking it, because it emphasizes the point I made earlier.
Mohammed wrote that question for me. That's why it's excellent.
Not really. Because it emphasizes the first point we made about that today, MENA healthcare is a very attractive sector, and it has come a very long way. We both know it took us 2 years to get a license to invest in Saudi. 7, 8 years ago?
Yeah.
It took us 2 years to get a license to enter. Today, you get it in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? At that time, manpower standards, facility requirements, basics were not there.
Yeah.
And we've come a very long way, where today there is a playbook. You know what you're allowed to do. I think the governments have played a very significant role in the past period that really enabled the private sector to thrive and to exist. And this is why investors like us have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in this market. Yeah. And honestly, I think I wouldn't be surprised to start seeing international funds flowing into the MENA region, giving the relatively much more stable situation as compared to just 5, 6 years ago.
I would add to that. I mean, and again, my response is very subjective. It's not objective. It's simply my opinion. But in Saudi in 2013, I can remember, the Saudi government began to talk about opening up healthcare investments to the private sector and really looking at foreign investors. And all of that was, I don't mean this to sound pejorative, but it was a lot of rhetoric from the top. But the person that may have actually been processing a license at the Ministry of Health or typing in the information, that message didn't get trickled down to them. Yeah. So even if the government was saying one thing, the person that was actually administering the work was not motivated in the same manner. We've completely seen that shift. When I first moved to the UAE in 2013, there was one incident where a surveyor came to license us and actually said, well, I can't give you the license because your courtyard doesn't have enough plants and nobody's going to come here unless it looks nicer. Yeah. So if you're dealing with the NHS or the CQC or the Joint Commission or CMS in the US, there is no surveyor preference. Yeah. The rules and the regulations are the rules and regulations. Yeah. What I've seen over the last 9 years, both in Saudi and in the UAE, is truly a standardization of the implementation of practice and people adhering to rules and regulations. So, the idea of a surveyor preference or the idea of WASTA, where you go in and you have a great relationship with someone so they move your license from the bottom of the pile to the top. We've seen all that go away. I mean, I'm sure it still exists to some degree, but things are a very level playing field. And if you're what we find is that if you do follow the rules and regulations and you have the right licensing requirements and you build a healthcare business that is attractive and can provide a public service, governments across the Middle East are motivated to get people working. And they've been very good at working with us to get us get us licensed, get us up and running and ensuring, but also being held to quality standards. I mean, we really are looking at more of a pay-per-play model in the Middle East. We're seeing people rewarded for good outcomes. So all of that has changed drastically over the last 9 years.
Michael, great point. I'm going to come back on that as well in terms of, in Arabic, shaitan's wakil, devil's advocate. I'm going to make a contrary point on that. But Zainab, just commented on the same thing.
I just wanted to add one more thing, which confirms what Michael is also saying, is that, in Morocco, back in just before COVID, the Moroccan Health Ministry and the World Health Organization had signed a health sector strategy for the country that takes into account, the progress in the implementation of Moroccan health system reforms. And the strategy had 4 broad lines. for the country, which were increasing fair access to affordable and quality services, but also reducing health inequalities between people who were getting private health insurance versus the public health insurance, or people who do not have public health insurance, but also fostering a certain governance in the health sector. And the hospital network we've seen over the past few years has really expanded in line with what the government had put in place in terms of strategic plan. So currently there are many new hospitals that are being constructed. And also, like I said earlier, we have been able to attract private investor, mainly from the UAE and particularly in France, that came to Morocco to build new facilities, hospitals, and clinics as well. So, just to confirm that in the region, I think, although there are disparities, there are certain similarities in terms of wanting to change the healthcare landscape.
Great point. I said I was going to be Vakil Shaitan, so devil's advocate, and go the other side, because we have, you've both painted great examples as well, Zainab, but in a slightly different way in terms of your market, of good things that are happening to close that chasm down. Again, let me give you an example of what I saw. Michael, it's partly your point as well. Dubai Healthcare, huge event. Arab Healthcare, huge event. As a guest of the Department of Health in Saudi Arabia, we helped produce and had brilliant guidance on PPP, privatization policies, 5-6 years ago. Mm-hmm. Beautifully produced brochures and so on. Now, trying to do a deal, and there's people in this room that I've worked with, trying to do a deal in Saudi at that time was impossible. It was a relatively simple deal, cancer care, with some of the major hospitals, but impossible because you couldn't get decisions made. What have you seen now, just going back on your, it's not a finished product yet, of course, and it never is, but what have you seen now that gives you much more confidence? Look, one of the questions we're getting from the audience is the reluctance of some healthcare investors to go outside of their home markets and go to the Middle East, right? Both in Middle East and the North African region. What are you seeing now? Let's expand on that a little bit more. What are you seeing now in terms of the attitudes that allows it to go beyond a beautiful brochure to real deals?
So I'll start, and then I'll pass it over to Mohammed. He might be a bit more, he may be more eloquent in this response. But I will say that still, to this day, it would be false for either of us to sit up and say that Saudi is easy.
Yeah.
And, I've always said to people, working in Saudi is not for the faint at heart. If you're someone that gets really nervous at a delay, or if you're someone that gets nervous at a change in a regulation or a roadblock, then that's not the place for you, because, the Middle East is still in some ways not easy to navigate. It's much easier than it was 9 or 10 years ago. Now, also, we live in a part of the world where I'm never going to sit up in a public conference and say something awful about the Ministry of Health of Saudi. Yeah. But I can tell you that we've all heard the Vision 2030, push toward PPP. We've heard these things for a long time. And there are very few of these that have come to fruition for a number of reasons. Prior to COVID, we saw more traction being made. And I think over the last 18 to 24 months, COVID has shut down a lot of that work because it's been very difficult to travel within the region. So there has been some trouble with that. But for us to sit on a panel and talk about the Middle East and say it's a cakewalk, if it were, then every private provider in the Western world would be there trying to plant a flag. It's not easy, it's difficult, but it's doable, and there's a reward to successfully navigating the Saudi market. I'll let Mohammed see if he can say something a bit more eloquent.
Well, I think you've covered it all. I would just highlight that. Think of it like this. When you're developing a strategy, it could take you years to really detail the objectives and where do you aim to achieve. And I think this is when you said what happened at that time. So yes, it took time.
Yeah.
And what shifted and what changed is that these objectives have become an action list.
Yeah.
With accountability, with clear responsibility on who's delivering. Back to Michael's point, One thing is for the leadership to say, I would like to get there. But another thing is having this cascading down to on the ground being implemented as an action. And this is exactly what happened. And just to add to it, when this whole drive is being driven in detail, right from the top, be it in the leadership of the UAE or the leadership in Saudi, the teams are actually looking to deliver. And we've started seeing the fruits of that already. And just as a closing statement, sorry, I took a bit of time on this. As a closing statement on this, again, you hit the nail on the head, Michael. We're not saying that a European or US-based investor can just walk into the Middle East today and invest and operate and do successfully very, very well. We're not there yet. I think having the local know-how or the local partner is still required in the meantime. But this doesn't mean they shouldn't be looking at the market. I think now is the time to look at the market along with local strategic partners.
Before you go to Zainab, I just want to add one more thing to that as well. The other thing is that the consumer in the Middle East has changed. And there was a period of time in the Middle East 10, 15 years ago that if a Western provider from the UK or the US came and hung a sign outside that said, you know, we're with Harvard Medical School, people would flock there. But what people want in the Middle East now and what they deserve is a good, solid care delivery model. And it doesn't matter who delivers it. They just want to make sure that they're getting good, world-class care to international standards and that they're being treated with dignity and respect and that it's predictable, the care that they receive. So I think a lot of the idea of just coming in and hanging a shingle outside the door that says you're affiliated with the Western provider is not going to work. People are much more mature and they're more sophisticated now about how they access healthcare, more so than they were 10 or 12 years ago.
Fantastic point, because the early days, and there was reluctance of investors outside of the region to go, it was trophy assets being created. I mean, I was involved with some of them. Dubai Healthcare City was a trophy asset in its first days. Later on, and also Western systems or investors made mistakes in terms of, we'll just provide our name with no quality insurance. And there's so many scare stories that is for another session about where things went wrong. Again, I'll come back on that. Zainab, just the point about, I thought Mohammed's point that he made there was a very, very important point in the context of, let's say, the UAE and Saudi. In the context of your jurisdiction, where governments or departments have policy, governance requirements and regulatory requirements, are you seeing them being implemented now as well in a good way that allows a little bit of transparency insofar as you can for investors to come in and drive the market?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said earlier, we've seen new entrants into the market, whether it's in Morocco or other countries in North Africa, such as Algeria and Tunisia. And the only reason is that because the government has, wants to attract investors into the country, so they're facilitating the investments to investors. So, like for instance, Tunisia has set, the healthcare sector as a national priority, and the system is still currently in need of pressing reforms. To improve the quality of the service, but they're still a country that attracts patients from other countries, neighboring countries, such as, Tunisian foreign patients come from Libya or Algeria. So to my understanding is that it's becoming better. 10 years ago, I don't think I would have gotten the same speech, but definitely, we're evolving.
That's a great response, Zainab. I think one of the things that we might want to talk about a little bit more is how North Africa is also seen as a gateway, Morocco in particular, for some investors from the West as a gateway into Saharan and Sub-Saharan Africa as well. So I know you mentioned that, and I perhaps towards the end we might develop that more.
Okay.
Because of COVID, and I wanted to ask how this has affected your own businesses, both as an investor but both as an operator as well. Prior to that, and Michael, your point about somebody comes in and hangs their sign and it's Harvard Medical, and therefore everybody's going to flock in, doesn't happen.
Right.
The old model used to be some kind of joint venture. People from Boston would come over. They would be situated in the local jurisdiction. They might have their own vehicle and they'll develop something there. COVID and the restrictions on travel have allowed other models to be created, a consultancy model or a remote provision. Are you seeing that as well? And is that helping drive some of the transactions you're doing locally?
Our business is largely a bricks and mortar business within MC Healthcare.
Okay.
And 60% of the patients that we see, particularly in the UAE, are repeat customers.
Right.
We've adjusted our digital platform some over COVID, but realistically what we found is that, as a matter of fact, Mohammed and I sat in the couple of the presentations earlier about AI, and I was fascinated by it. But I told him, I actually said, I feel like a fossil sometimes hearing people talk about these types of things. But everyone's moving to digitization, everyone's moving to telehealth, and there's a huge platform and a space for that. Our business predominantly is a bricks and mortar business where people come in person. And there were areas within our business that did suffer because of COVID, particularly like our cosmetics and aesthetics business. But we couldn't have anticipated the desire for everyone to return to normal.
Yeah.
And people wanted to get out again and come into the doctor. Something like our IVF business, that is certainly a personal business where people need to be seen in person.
Yeah.
Where we've used a digitization or a telehealth model is more around chronic disease management. People that have gotten the same medications prescribed month after month for the last 5 years, and really is it necessary for them to go in and see a specialist to get their insulin refilled?
Yeah.
So in that area, and particularly though that population is very vulnerable to comorbidities.
Yeah.
So we've seen maybe more telehealth and more of a digitization. We've also opened up our home dialysis business. So we've done a lot more home dialysis because vulnerable dialysis patients are more interested in being dialyzed in the home. But otherwise, people have come in. I said earlier, we've had 4.5 million patient encounters in the first half of this year. So I've seen us adjust our care model within the facilities, and I've seen some move toward digitization and telehealth and other areas, but largely our patients still access our services in person. I know that doesn't sound glamorous, particularly to in a world where everyone is doing digital, but that's our experience.
But as you grow, I mean, I just follow this through with as you grow and therefore possibly look at expanding out of the UAE and into other markets, do you see that as being part of your proposition going forward?
I think it has to be. I mean, we don't want to be left behind.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's where, that's not our full future. That's a component of our future.
Sure.
But I think Zainab could probably speak more eloquently on that as well, because that's her role. But for us, I mean, I think that, that will always be a smaller component of our business. Our business is definitely an in-person, personal healthcare business.
Understood. Mohammed?
Yeah.
I would generally agree with what
Yeah.
Michael said. I think we believe that technology is important and will play a significant role in the future, but it will not replace the brick and mortar and the conventional healthcare. That said, integrating it, identifying the appropriate technology that complements your service offering would be something we're interested in. We started doing that during COVID in our hospitals, very basic, but we started integrating technology into it. As an investment firm, Amanat has announced that we would look into health tech and ed tech deals, because we do both.
Yeah.
We've actually transacted in ed tech in October 2020. We haven't in health tech yet, or med tech. We're eyeing the field. We don't claim we fully understand it.
Yeah.
But we're very interested in potentially identifying them. But the majority of our investment, I would say more than 90% of our capital, will continue to go to brick and mortar and to specialized hospitals.
That's helpful. Zainab, just on the same theme, obviously your business is smack bang in the middle of technology, and technology is such an important thing. But on a wider scale, not only your own business, but I would have thought that technology is absolutely critical to what you're doing, not only in Morocco, in North Africa, but elsewhere. But what are you seeing with other people in the market as well that are not necessarily in the same space as you, but They've just called to. That's the ministry calling, Zainab. Did you say anything bad
Please
about
tell
them?
me you're not going to answer it.
Apologies for this. Really apologize for
Zainab, don't worry. You didn't say anything bad about the ministry. So.
Sorry, I'm just.
Well, well, let's carry on in terms of. Sorry, Zainab.
Sure.
Are you?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm here. I'm fully with you.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So maybe let me perhaps Hamid tell you about our experience since we're in the tech world, and how COVID has clearly impacted positively our business. We've seen how during the pandemic, the surge for the use of telehealth technology has helped millions of patients, including the ones in rural areas, get diagnosed through face-to-face video consultations with specialists, and also have their treatment plans monitored from a distance. So, I mean, for me, obviously, technology is definitely not going to replace, the physician, but technology is here technology became the standard of care. It's driving a rise in service providers and the need for service, I would say, standardization across the care in general. And we clearly expect a shift, I would say, an acceleration of the largest trends in the healthcare today, because COVID to me has been a real disruptive catalyst across every industry, and especially in healthcare, where it's really reshaping this industry, because we're now talking about Internet of Medical Things, teleradiology, telemedicine, when also we talk about remote patient monitoring. So there are many growth opportunities in healthcare, and I think we all need to adjust, and we need to evolve with technology. So it's it's a growth opportunities for many of us in the field.
I agree with what you've said. I mean, I just listening to Michael and Mohammed and you, Zainab, in our own business, and we're involved and advising people throughout that whole spectrum of bricks and mortar operators, providers, and so on. The biggest changes, I would say, and the speed and growth is coming out that sort of technology end, in terms of how procurement, reimbursement, remote medicine, artificial intelligence, that's where it's coming. And I think and both of you are keeping an eye on this, of course, to see how it can be utilized in your own businesses. But anybody who really doesn't keep an eye on that is going to fail. Yeah. We're coming towards the end of our session, which I think we could go on for another hour, but I'm going to finish it, and I'll be careful. I won't ask you to say anything that will be recorded, and the ministries can see what you said or anything. But part of making sure that investors who are coming from outside, who don't know the region, in my view, they shouldn't. They should co-fund. They should go, like you were saying, Mohammed, with somebody who knows the region well, because it's a complex region, and go with a partner there. But there are some scare stories and some pitfalls, and I was going to ask each of you to give me some examples of things to avoid if you're an investor wanted to come into the Middle East or North Africa, things to avoid.
On this one, frankly, I don't think it's specific to the MENA. Horror stories are in each and every market around the world.
I agree.
And actually, international markets have had much more horror stories than the MENA. Yeah. It's just that when it happens in the MENA, the whole universe starts to talk about it. I think, in general, we have very strong governance in the markets where we operate. Regulators are keeping an eye on how business is being done by the private sector as well as by the public sector, and that is enabling the private sector to continue to grow. You would look at each one. I mean, I'll give you our companies as an example. We've been growing over the past few years significantly, and that's organic growth. This is fundamental value being provided to our shareholders because our businesses are in the right sectors, they're protected, doing business the appropriate way. So I wouldn't scare the international market from the MENA as such. We might have heard of some stories, but these things happen in different markets as well. And I think it's a safe place to invest or co-invest in the region. Wouldn't you agree, Michael?
I would. I think I have a responsibility to answer this very carefully, but also to answer it honestly. Obviously, NMC has been through a really difficult time over the last 18 months. And I think what I would say to people who have watched the NMC story and seen what's happened is that the issues with NMC were internal and not external. That, governance is alive and well in the Middle East, and I think our story is a cautionary tale, but it has resulted in stronger oversight financially of large healthcare companies, particularly large healthcare companies that are listed in the UK. And I think that the message that I would give people is that the Middle East is open for business, and that if you are tenacious, and if you do think quick on your feet, and if you're willing to put the time in, that it's a great place to invest. I have a responsibility also. Anytime someone comes from the U.S. and they want to meet me and they're coming to Dubai, I'll say, sure, I'll meet you. And they'll say, listen, we're really thinking about investing here. And I'll say, oh, when are you going to be back in town? They say, we'll be back in 6 months. So you can't fly in on a business class flight once every 3 to 4 months and do business in the Middle East. If you're going to work in the Middle East and you want to invest and you want to be successful, you have to have boots on the ground, invest the time and energy in the culture, the regulatory environment, understanding the people and what they need in healthcare. But it's a great place to invest. It's a great place to live and work. And we're just fortunate to be able to be there.
I think just the points that you've made, I mean, I find it difficult to find examples that linger, bad examples that linger. I think the Middle East in particular, the Gulf and Saudi, and some of the other states, but we won't mention them, some of the other states in the region learn very quickly. Mm-hmm. Where there's been an issue, it learns very quickly and it doesn't repeat itself, which in larger markets, let's say, in the West, it takes a long time to get that thing sorted out again. So that's a big plus sign for investors going in, that if you've heard of something that happened 4 or 5 years ago, it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And that's an important point. NMC is a good example. That's internal, but it's a fully functioning, solid business going forward, I would have thought. It's learned from what happened in the past. Zainab, I think your market in Morocco and perhaps in North Africa and further afield, well, further afield would be different. I mean, in terms of you're saying you are moving into Africa a little bit more. I'm talking about Saharan Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. How are you finding some of those jurisdictions? I know it's not part of our remit as MENA, but you are seeing some of those sort of very basic markets, I would have thought.
Absolutely. Well, we recently announced a new capital raise and a concurrent stake sale to Orange, one of the biggest telco based in Africa, which has over 130 million customers across 18 countries. So, our other investor, which is AXA Assurance, and we'll be going to some sub-Saharan countries through the telco and AXA, which is a way for us to grow our market and get to know better the jurisdiction. So we're going to be new in those markets and learning more about the jurisdiction, but we know for sure that there are many great opportunities as well, and we want to bring the best healthcare in the region as well.
We've got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to finish it off. I think this has been a fantastic session. I think you guys have been brilliant in terms of articulating very, very clearly what the opportunities may be and how the markets develop. Michael, just a few words to finish off from you, if you wanted.
I think we've covered most everything. As I said, I mean, the message I wanted to make clear today is that the MENA region is open for business, and it's a rich environment for business, and it's for people that are interested in investing. There's a great opportunity there.
and fly in more regularly than 6 months.
Yes, definitely.
Mohammed?
Well, fully agreed. I think Middle East healthcare market is the next best thing in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And we're very well positioned there and look for collaboration. And thank you for moderating this session.
No, you've made it easy, both of you. And Zainab, I'm going to leave the last word to you, because you started this, so last word to you.
Definitely. Well, first of all, thank you for moderating the session. And my last word would be, I mean, when we look at all the big tech companies that are really increasing their market into, new opportunities in healthcare and launching a new product, there definitely is this huge market, and we want to say, yes, there are opportunities, come to the region, and there's so much to do here. So it would be my closing remark. But definitely the big tech companies are also looking into the market and doing great things in technology as well.
Someone sent me a message and said, can you ask a question that says, play it again, Sam, in the question? And I couldn't do it. I'm out of time now. So, but listen, thank you so much to Michael, Mohammed, and Zainab. Thank you so much. That was brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Julian.
The team, that was absolutely excellent. So we'll be back here in 10 minutes for workforce and culture. Really interesting, another really interesting session with speakers from Corian, Diavirum, Unilabs. All looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dignity. It demands a rapid COVID test because we all deserve an answer. It demands your heart stays connected to your doctor so you know it's beating as it should. And a rapid test to help evaluate concussion in case something were to happen. At Abbott, we fight for these moments, developing life-changing technologies because dignity demands it.
Oh, it's not us.
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to this afternoon's session on workforce and culture. Before we get into that, a quick reminder of the launch of our HBI Intelligence Investor Tool, which was mentioned earlier on today, and it is going to be in beta from now until December, the end of December. Please have a look at it. All HBI Intelligence members will be able to get access to it. My earlier notice about the Jeremy Hunt reception, we're leaving from downstairs at the main entrance at 6:30 in a walking bus to go across Westminster Bridge to Church House. So with no further ado, let me introduce your moderator for this session, which is my colleague Lee Murray. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Welcome to this session on workforce and culture. So I think if I did a sort of a hands-up process of most of the people in the room, and I asked you if workforce was keeping you awake at night and was one of your issues or your company's issues, I don't know, perhaps you could raise your hands if it is in the top 3 of your issues. It's good to know, Julian, that that's it. So I mean, it's no secret. It's been spoken about at length at every session we've done so far. It will be spoken about at every session we do tomorrow as well. So today, I have a panel of 3 expert women who will take us through their journeys, their thoughts, and their experiences over the last couple of years, how they've worked on building culture programs into the heart of their organizations, how they're looking after their staff, looking after their employees, and most importantly, how they're looking to increase that and build talent pipelines and build education programs to attract more workforce to the sector. So I'll start on my left. So joining us from Switzerland is Samantha Laurent. Hi, Samantha. So Samantha Laurent, she spent the last 7 years in Unilabs, completely sort of overhauling and revolutionizing their culture with their Care Big program. Unilabs, probably most of you know, but they are, and Samantha, or Sammy in particular, is responsible for nearly 13,000 employees across 200 labs and 180 imaging centers in 14 countries in Europe and in the UAE and Peru. Sophie Boissard, the CEO of Corian. Hi, Sophie. Good to see you on digitally instead of here yesterday. So I'm glad you made it back to Paris safely. So Sophie Boissard is the CEO of French elderly care giant Corian. She's responsible for nearly 60,000 employees across 1,000 facilities in France, Germany, Italy, UK, Belgium, Spain, the Netherlands. She also has a target of tripling the number of nurses that Corian trains annually to 6,000. And so welcome, Sophie, thank you. And with me in the room today is Kirsty Bashforth. Kirsty is the Chief People and Communications Officer at Global Renal Care Group Diavirum. You're responsible for 14,000 people.
Yep.
Is that right? These numbers are all good. In 450 clinics across 24 countries. So I think you've got the most countries to deal with. Yeah? The biggest challenge.
The country prize.
And prior to joining Diavirum in 2020, you spent sort of 24 years at BP.
I did.
And in 2019, you literally wrote the book on culture.
I did.
So we've got an expert on culture in the room with us as well today. So welcome. So I think to kick things off, sorry if I keep playing with my ear. To kick things off, I think the past 18 months have been particularly difficult. Moving forward, they're looking a little bit uncertain still. There's lots and lots still to deal with. So I thought to sort of kick things off, it'd be quite interesting to get everybody's perspective of exactly what those issues have been. And there's been this weird sort of, in healthcare services, obviously you've had people in sort of the front line, people who are very much sort of on the front line of everything, and then you've had cultures and people in your business to deal with who are working in sort of clinical, sort of perhaps safer spaces. So I was interested to know kind of what this impact has been and what the impact of the pandemic generally has been on your organizational culture and the lessons that you've learned. So Kirsty, perhaps I'll start with you on that one.
Well, there's lots to share. I mean, the first thing I'd say is our clinical staff, who make up the vast majority of our organization, obviously had some extreme measures that we needed to put in place, and we went into those in January 2020 with our contingency plan to make sure our patients and staff were safe, and therefore if your staff are also safe, your patients feel safer. And then we went into a vaccination phase more recently towards the start of this year where we're now up to over 72% of our patients worldwide double vaccinated and some even triple vaccinated, over 90% of our staff. But the coming out is a very different set of paces for those staff, because not all countries, as we know, have the same levels of vaccination. So it's not as if everybody's coming out at the same pace and at the same level. So there's different measures for clinical staff versus office staff. We also had sort of contingency plans for office staff working from home by default. We're now bringing that back to not by default. But again, different paces in different countries. So we've got different paces and different measures for clinical staff versus office staff. And we've also got probably some of the more acute situations that our clinical staff were working in versus our office staff who were relatively safe sitting at home. So there's a challenge there to have different measures, different paces, different things coming out. I think it was almost clearer going into the pandemic about what everybody needed to do. Coming out is way more challenging, way more bumpy, because it's very complex. Not every situation is the same. So we had to spend quite a lot of time ensuring that our clinical staff were really supported, really felt safe, had excellent well-being practices, but also paying mind to our office-based staff who were at home and are now probably looking at the more chronic, longer-term, how do I come back to the office? Do I want to come back to the office? Are they tired? So there's acute and chronic, different paces, different measures. It's been active management, shall we say.
A difficult first couple of years on the job.
Challenging.
Challenging,
Yes.
yeah.
I come from the oil industry, though, so that's used to being difficult as well.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Used to a good few crises.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I won't mention those. We'll not talk, not least the sort of the current energy crises that are going on, actually. But that's a topic for a different conference, I think. So, Sammy, how's your sort of last couple of years been? How have you found that sort of the culture development? How's your Care Big program sort of helped, or what's it been like at Unilabs? Oh. I think you might be on mute. I apologize.
She's not on mute.
No?
But somebody in the room's got you on mute.
Oh, no, can you hear me now?
There we go. I can hear you.
Okay, apologies. I don't know what happened there. I was not on mute. So I think Care Big was always and is always about putting the front line at the heart and start of what we do in Unilabs. And of course, as Kirsty said, our first concern was keeping the workforce safe and caring about each other. I wanted to highlight the change in the leadership. I think that with remote working and having a two-stream flow of people at the front line and people then working from home, it changed our leadership into a much more humble and much more agile team as well. I think that you need to make sure that you reach out to people and take those everyday Care Big gestures into account. So how are people doing, checking in with them, having those local conversations. And I think that the remote working, using Teams, using virtual working really helped to do that. And we have a very, very strong culture, and we see our leaders as caregivers as much as they give care for our patients, as much as they give care for our customers. They need to be able to start by giving care to one another. And I think that gives way to less superfluous items, and probably you go more into the very factual and the very strict consensus of leadership. And there was a very big pendulum swing with us with COVID. The first months were about keeping safe as people and keeping safe as a business. So looking at, operations were being replanned. Hospitals were unsure of where this was going to go. And then suddenly coping with a very increased demand for PCR testing, for COVID testing, and learning as a business to really adapt on a basically day-to-day basis as to what we were able and needing to do. And I think that around 40% of people now don't want to go back to the new normal. They don't want to go back to the sort of what is the normal way of working every day in the office. So we're going, as Kirsty said, coming out of this is also going to be a challenge, because we're discovering together, our frontline people and also our leaders and our people working from home, what is this new normal actually going to mean for all of us. And I think that we're learning what the acceleration of digital is actually going to mean for our care big culture, and what it's actually going to mean for us as a business. And that term proximity becomes about connecting on very different levels, and not purely physical connection in physical meeting. All of that puts a different emphasis on how we work together, and it actually helped us create proximity. You have a virtual coffee break with somebody at the other end of the, and it's no longer seen as a plan B. Connecting with them via Teams is seen as the way of doing things now, and I think that actually has helped us in some way.
That's an interesting comment. I was talking to somebody just a few minutes ago, because obviously this is sort of the first time a lot of us have been together. Some of us maybe in the last few weeks have seen each other in person, started going back to the office. And one of the things that people say is, somebody said to me outside, is it's great because you run around and you see somebody, and then you've done that, and then you don't feel as awkward on Teams when you talk to them anymore, because you've actually met them physically. And I think in team working structures, people that haven't seen each other and met each other for a long time, it's quite an important sort of ability to be able to do that. It's quite a nice benefit, really, to be able to have that flexibility. I pick up on a point, actually, that I just wanted to bring on to. But Sophie, I just wanted to get your experience and to the same question as to how your culture has been impacted over the last couple of years. You're obviously in a slightly different setting with, in care homes and things that have been completely highlighted by a lot of issues, particularly during the first and the second wave. I mean, what's your cultural journey been like over the last couple of years?
Yeah, actually, the last 18 months have been very, very intense, and sometimes also very challenging. If I try to summarize what actually those 18 months brought to the company, I would say first an immense, from my side and from the leadership side, immense gratefulness for the care workers that were there, ensured care continuity, especially during the first wave, first lockdown. It was really something unexpected and probably unheard at this level, and the way everyone was there, no one missing, and support function being transformed into helpers and going on site to support, to provide procurement, PPE, whatever stuff was needed and required, was for me really probably something that I will never forget, and that I will be immensely grateful until I die, I would say, for. It was really, really extreme, and the way they did it is, I'm very proud of what they did, actually, and this is what I'm saying is actually true for all the leaders in the organization. So first is gratefulness, and this is now very, very strong in the company's culture. I will explain. The second major one, is alignment. Actually, as a care company dedicated to elderly and fragile people support, we are very multi-local. We are present in across Western Europe in 7 countries, 1,000 locations, facility, care networks. So very much multi-local. And until COVID, the say was, here is different. It's different in the north of Netherlands. It's different in the south of France. So we are doing quite the same thing. Purpose is the same, but the way we are doing it is very different, and you cannot understand. The culture is different. And with the COVID, actually, all the facilities had to face exactly the same unknown at the same time. Yes, as Kirsty was explaining, regulation and guidelines from the local authorities were sometimes different. But actually, as a company, we decided to tackle that challenge with the best knowledge and to constantly improve and change and adapt procedures, taking actually the best possible option, because we were in a position where we could see what happened in Italy to start with, and then in Spain, and how it expanded to France. Germany was more protected. So we could actually prevent and prepare the whole network with the best possible knowledge every time. And it has created a very, very strong alignment internally on quality, on procurement, on the key standards. And it has actually accelerated the streamlining and alignment on same standard and measures. So I would say we are more than ever a European company than we used to be before COVID. And it was really my aim to have that journey. But I would have bet, we will need 5 years to be there. And we had to be there within a couple of months. And we won't ever get out of this, because actually everyone realized how powerful and how helpful it has been to have that knowledge and that strong alignment and strong support within the company. And last but not least, the third lesson is definitely about new way of working. Just to say, for example, digital, remote learning, remote training, remote onboarding. Even if referring to my case, I have now a virtual breakfast with a couple of people across Europe on a regular basis every 2 weeks. And I would never have dared doing such things before the crisis. And now it's really part of the daily life. So I would say the connection and the connectivity has become very different from what it used to be. So we were a very low-tech type of activity, and we are still, but at least the enabler to communicate with family, with relatives, with authorities, now it's really part of the daily routine, and it has accelerated a lot. So these are the three main game changers coming from the crisis. And actually, after the first wave, so it was last summer, 2020, we decided to have a wider tour within the organization just to let people talk and explain what they had to go through. We had also, we asked also external journalists to have a movie just to take the testimonies and all the says about what we had to go through. And based on that materials, I decided to fully reshuffle and redraft the company's values and purpose. And we came through that to the multiple contribution and testimonies. We decided that what we learned through the crisis was actually that the core values in our activity is about trust. The trust together, the trust with the families, trust with the authorities, the trust we give and we are given. It's about initiative, and we had to demonstrate how much initiative matters in such a situation, because none of this was pre-written. And it's about responsibility, because at the end of the day, we are all responsible for elderly and fragile people and for their beloved ones. And this is about responsibility and transparency, and always goes with that. And I would say we are not the same as the one we were before the crisis. And this crisis has changed us in some extent, improve us, because we had to be confronted to something, I would say the ultimate challenge and crisis, unfortunately. So that's what I would like to share with you.
Yeah, can I just build on something that Sami said and also Sophie said, that it may seem counterintuitive, but I think in this sort of situation, cultures can be strengthened, not necessarily weakened just because we're all on digital. And both of you have mentioned the focused leadership has been bounced into. A lot of leadership was there already, particularly in this sector, but really listening to the front line, not turning up and saying, I'll come and visit your clinic, but actually, is it appropriate? Is it not? Do you want help? Do you not? So flipping who's in charge of the focus, which is great, long may that stay. But the second thing is, and Sophie, you mentioned it, using this opportunity to really think about your culture and really strengthen it. And like you, Sophie, we actually looked at our culture over the last year and realized while we had an amazing culture in operation in the organization, it was a bit of a cluttered wardrobe of expectations, and we used the opportunity to really galvanize people, almost throw out all the clothes of the cluttered wardrobe on the floor, pull back in a nice organized wardrobe of exactly, let's sum up what our culture is, because we've learned even more about ourselves over the last year. And so it's like a which is first, chicken or egg, but using it as a virtuous circle to reinforce the culture and to share stories and then reinforce more culture. And it has actually brought us together. Oddly, we've been very far apart, but we've really worked hard to keep together. To my sort of chronic and acute, it's exhausting after a while, and you don't want every conversation to be digital.
Yeah.
But it has forced a lot of companies to really focus on your culture, which I think is excellent. And as you say, it will never all be the same again. You know, the rubber band stretches and you don't remain completely stretched, you go back to halfway. But I think we've all learned something about it, and it's really brought culture into absolute core.
And it probably has brought where you may, you mentioned, Sophie, you have breakfast with two people across Europe. I mean, bringing clinical teams and senior management together in a way that they never would have had access before.
Yeah, absolutely, and you can do that fast digitally, can't you? Next week we'll be doing some celebration. We've got a senior leadership team meeting. We'll be bringing in some clinics into some awards, and with the top 45, we're going to have a clinic from Lithuania, Brazil, and Hungary in the meeting. It's great, using those technologies to bring people closer together from a workforce point of view.
Yeah, and I wanted to pick up on something you said, Kirsty, which was about storytelling. And we started, storytelling was the part of inception of Care Big. I think stories resonate with people. There in this room, more than PowerPoints and bar graphs can ever do that. It resonates and does something to people, and I think it builds trust and it builds brand. And those two coexist very nicely together for the success of the organization. So me having those check-in moments and those virtual coffee breaks together, it wasn't an agenda based on strict performance measures. It was about, how are you feeling? How is this affecting you this day or this week? And I think that has created even more of a caring culture. And when we started to work on Care Big, we decided to work on the culture building behaviors alongside it. So how do our leaders turn up every day? Back to basics. It's back to basic things that we as leaders need to do every day, whatever in the organization, whether the P&L is raining, whether it's sunny, whatever the weather in the organization, there are things that we as caregivers need to give and straight to our people. And I think that COVID it has been a springboard for accelerating and deepening that culture organization and giving power to people on the front line who have that purpose at the epicenter of everything they're doing. It's given them that ability that they so rightly deserved. And as you say, we should not lose that now.
I wanted to pick up on the culture, but a slightly different culture, the sort of the hero culture which has emerged, and I presume it's sort of global. It has been very sort of, very very much the centre of the focus of the UK, with key workers and nurses being declared heroes, and then the backlash that then came from that, with the way that people were sort of treating them, and it's brought people out in two different ways. It's either solidified their purpose, or it's made them run and seek a different purpose. And I'm just curious to hear, because obviously that has a huge impact on your own internal culture, your own ability to hire, retain, to look after the safety of your patient, of your employees, and ultimately then the patients. And all three of you operate in very different areas, with a lot of chronic and acute care, with care homes and nursing homes, and with the diagnostics sort of often right at the very start, at the beginning of that journey. And I mean, so Sami, I mean, how has that impacted, how has that hero culture impacted you, both positively and negatively, actually? Because it's good to talk about the negative side of this in terms of workforce.
So we actually, probably without any further motivation and thought went into it, but we started to refer to our people quite automatically as our uni heroes. I would write out to them, we have workplace, speak with them, and this gave our frontline people really that sense of purpose, and we celebrated that with them. We thanked them for it. We never lost sight of the fact that they were the heartbeat of the organization. So I think it, as I said, it really highlighted that. It also showed people's vulnerability, people feeling tired, overwhelmed, people working from home that did not have, that regenerative community around them of family and friends, feeling isolated, feeling that they'd lost a little bit the direction of travel and on what they were doing. So I think you had one population really going and really not even seeking the purpose, was actually seeking them. And I think that they were the kind of two communities that I found myself speaking with and looking after during the crisis. And I think some people also, they come back to what I would call the brass tacks of life. Is this a job or is this a vocation? Am I adding value where I am? Does this correspond to who I want to be? Not just what do I want to do, but who I want to be. And I saw also some of that in some of our leadership layers. And that is something that we have authentic conversations about, and we speak with people, and we try to understand what is really affecting the person. But we saw a number of people being adversely affected through fatigue and through loss of purpose connection.
And Kirsty, how about you in that sort of environment?
Yeah, so our clinical staff last year, we put a program in place and gave support to each country and said, here's an amount of money. How can you do what locally you need to do to support our staff being able to do their work and not burn out? So, for example, in Brazil, it was on-site massages. In Saudi, it was, book clubs and counseling. In Albania, it was friendship groups. There were all sorts of things. In Spain, it was, extra support for nursery vouchers and care vouchers, etc. So, care and childcare. So we put that in place, but that has moved into a well-being strategy, actually. And this year, we've spent a lot of time on the mental well-being side. We surveyed the whole company in the summer. We were sort of positively surprised that people were still holding up. But what I think you're starting to see now is people making the choices of, we actually sort of got through it. We got through it. And people are either, two camps. They're either saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm exhausted. I actually need to go and do something completely different. And that can be clinical staff or management staff. And we're also seeing other people going, I'm joining this company because it's got a purpose. And we've got some, on the management side, that's great because people can arrive immediately. On the clinical side, actually, there's a time lag because people want to get into the sector, but you need to get trained. So it doesn't help the workforce potential shortages, but there are positives and negatives. People burnt out and taking a decision not to be here, and other people saying, actually, this is where I want to be. And we've seen some people come from all sorts of industries into the management functions as well. I mean, I came from the oil industry. Sure. It's quite different. Sure. Yeah.
And I think I wanted to touch upon something you mentioned in the introduction, something we actually spoke about in December last year about you were struggling with the issue about, well, how am I going to approach, making sure all my clinical staff are vaccinated, which I know it is probably something, Sophie, that in your UK businesses at the moment, I'm keen to hear. Kirsty, you told us, is it 95% of...
We're up at over 90% on staff and over 72% on patients worldwide, which is, of course, we can't control. We can't control. We can influence and support and ensure it's executed as fast as possible. Yeah.
Sure. And Sophie, what are your... I mean, how has that been impacting you in particular? What are your sort of... What's your journey with vaccinations, and talk about mandatory vaccinations? What are your sort of... what's your story?
It's of course a key dimension to prevent from further pandemic wave. Currently, we are at 97% across Europe of vaccinated employees, at least with the first intake. So the second will come for some of them in the days to come. So it's a very high level. We've been of course quite helped by the mandatory vaccination regulation in France and in Italy. Actually, it started with Italy, then UK decided to go, and France. And so I'm very, very glad to see the result. Of course, it was not easy for some of our employees. We had to ask really a very limited number, less than 100 employees, to stop working because for the time being they don't have done the first intake. But all in all, it's a great comfort to know that everyone is safe, let's say, and should not convey any virus further. To come back to the previous question, what was the impact in terms of mental health of employee and burnout in the company? I would say quite the same as Kirsty described. We of course provide a lot of support and financial support to countries so that they could put in place the relevant action plan to support their employee in the various homes and clinics. What we discovered is actually that, all the listening program from external psychologists or whatever are not necessarily what people want to have. They really want to be able to discuss in the team with the relevant support, of course, but it's really very much what happens locally that help people to get through. And as you just said, Kirsty, some people decided that they had made it, that it was enough, and they would like to change. This happened. But I would say we have also been able to attract new profiles to the company because of the purpose, because actually people discovered what it means actually to be a care, to what care jobs, healthcare jobs means, and so people were attracted to this type of career path, and this has actually accelerated the internal qualification and training path that we have currently. So we have a target of having 10% of our staff being engaged in such qualifying paths. So for young people and also for people that want to develop and get to higher qualification. And I would say it has given a strong push to that program across Europe. Maybe one last topic I would like to tackle and share with my colleagues, co-panelists. It's actually, for the time being, I have really the feeling, in at least in the European labor markets, that the vaccination centers have significantly destabilized, jeopardized the labor market. We see a lot of nurses or physicians that actually decide to go for a self-employed or a short-term position into vaccination centers. So they work, let's say, 2-3 days, and then they say then they go on holiday, and then are not available anymore. So I think short-term, this is a major disruption. So I hope that this vaccination campaign is now over and that we can have these people back into normal care, because otherwise staff scarcity is a huge issue anyway. But if the qualified people are a kind of attract into short-term engagement and only perform vaccination and then go on holiday, then it's going to be very difficult. But I hope it's not only a short-term disruption. I don't know, what is your experience on that?
You don't need another competitor for people, do you? You don't need any other competitors entering the market.
Really don't.
And Sammy, do you have any comments just on that aspect? Has that impacted in you in particular on vaccination centres? Are you seeing that across your market?
In France, yes, for sure. We have similar issues, I think, in terms of attracting people. And I think people are going for also shorter term and shorter term projects. And we've seen a move towards that. For us, it's always going to be also a challenge with our pathologists and our radiologists. Over 65% of them are aged 55 and over. So it's, for us, the skills gap is also between those going into retirement, those mentors, and those coming out of university. And that is also for us a really critical skills gap that we have to adapt to and are using clearly digitalization to work through. So that is on top of nurses and on top of what we've seen with vaccination centers for COVID.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask anybody in the room, give you the opportunity to, if anybody has a question that they'd like to add. I see a hand up. I'll repeat it in the, if you say it, I can hear you, I'll repeat it.
Okay.
There we go.
It's a twofold question, actually, regarding the topic of culture. You all described the core values that you have in your company, particularly Sophie in the Korean group. And my question is basically, you define that from the top, but how do you manage I can imagine it's a top-down process in the beginning, and then there will be bottom-up movements. And how do you integrate that in the culture that you have in your company? That's so to say the first question. Second question, you talked about people quitting a job, particularly during the pandemic, and looking exhausted, looking for something different. I used to work in the care industry as well, and my impression was that most people, they don't quit the job, but they quit the direct boss they have because they're not happy with the management, with the direct management. So, what's your experience on that?
Thank you. You all heard those two-part questions, right? So, was that directed to anybody in particular? You mentioned Sophie, perhaps to start, or?
That would be great, but I would like to hear it from all of you.
Yeah, we'll put that all through. Sophie, we'll go to you first.
Okay, so culture and top-down process. Actually, it has been a top-down and bottom-up process on both sides. So, of course, it's a leadership decision to decide about the company's core values, but we made it very interactive, having some mirror group of facility managers, of nurses, of caregivers, of the various professions, discussing across the board about their perception and their also what they sense, that what they feel as being core values. That was the first. It has been a 1-year process, actually. So we decided about the 3 core values, and then we decided to work about attitudes, behaviors, what it means in the daily life everywhere across the networks, what it means when you are a caregiver in a French nursing home, what it means if you are working in a mental health clinic in Spain, and so actually I came out of this with a very, very I would say a telling book of behaviors based on anecdotes and situations, the daily situation one would face in a facility. And this material is really a great one, has been drafted, reworked, translated into the various languages, and has been also translated into games. So that actually, and now we are on tour, and this is the In Caring Hands, so-called In Caring Hands, which is our signature tour. And in each and every facility, and this is really the local management that do that, there are games and discussion on the values and the behaviors associated with that. And it helps to tackle actually the question of how to really tackle the difficult care situation, how to get on with families, how to be transparent about difficult situation, how to report about things that went not so well, how also to deal with colleagues. So I think it's a huge opportunity actually to, to open hearts and open discussion and make sure people really feel free to discuss and to understand what is at stake. And this is really a huge, I would say, a huge bond dimension across the company. So that's for the way we work on the value and the culture of the company. On the people quitting, actually what happened in the last 12 months is very special, I would say. So there has been people, care nurses, managers, that especially after the first or the second wave in Germany, had to face very, very difficult situation, and they were exhausted, and they said, I need a rest, or I want to do something else, or in a different environment. So it's not about, difficult leadership locally. This is, of course, part of the industry and the segment, that's for sure. But what happened with the COVID is very specific. So and again, those people, I would say, retiring or jumping out of the segment, this is not so important. If I look at the fluctuancy, so turnover rate, at least in Corian, it has been actually down in 2020, and it's decreasing in 2021. And the average duration, so the tenure duration, so is growing. So it means that actually there are more people that are actually more engaged, more committed because of or despite the crisis than people that cannot stand it anymore and wants to leave. But you're right, local management in care activities is, of course, is what makes the difference. It's such a core pillar of a company.
Yeah. Kirsty, perhaps you can take on those two.
Yeah, in terms of culture, what would I say? There's some basic ingredients. As Sophie says, it's not just top down. It's never just top down. It's never a thing. You have to get what your culture is really, 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 really simple, and don't change the message. That sounds basic, but it's essential that everybody can understand what it is, how to sum it up, remember it, etc. The second one is your leaders have to, when I say role model, that's not the right term because nobody's perfect, but they have to show that it matters, talk about it, repeat it, listen for it, and make it important. You really do need to ensure that whatever your words are and how you're saying you want to show up, it's woven through your processes, the processes that touch everybody. Performance management, interview questions, onboarding, the things that are the same for everybody. They're ideal places to put it in. And then storytell to bring it to life from wherever around the organization. A couple of other ingredients, go virally engage people who want to get involved around the organization. People love to belong. They love to feel special. They love to get involved beyond their daily job, particularly if they're purpose-led. Never try to measure the behavior's outcome. Measure what you're trying to put in. Measure, are the words the same? Measure, are we putting it into the processes? So measure the leading indicators, not the lagging indicators, and do it on repeat for a long time. Think of it like you're making it a core part of your operations. And those, no matter where you are in what organization, those sort of are the basic ingredients. And support your frontline staff. As Sophie said, and Sammy said, the situations where they can bring it to life, listen for them, help people be equipped for them, make it fun. Don't make it technical. But there are, and as I say, it's never done and it's never precisely measured because it will always evolve because people come in and out of the organization. But this is change, not a communications exercise. It's change, it's people's new habits, it's people's new behaviors, and it takes repeat. It's a bit like you can say you're going on a diet and you can do it for 3 weeks, but once you stop and you don't change any habits and you keep drinking blue milk instead of red milk, you're back to where you were. You've got to be committed to drink red milk forever. It's a new habit. You can tell I've done that because that's how I think about it.
Or no.
I only drink red milk
Yeah.
now. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Kirsty. I mean, Sammy, same to you. Do you share the sort of the same opinions, or?
Yeah, I mean, for our culture creation, we had a top-down, bottom-up, and side-to-side approach. Our management team were working on the mission, motto, and mantra. So, the motto being our promise to our customer, the mantra being the one thing you call anybody from the organization up in the middle of the night. Well, I wouldn't encourage it, but if you had to, and you ask them about our mantra, they should automatically resonate with Care Big. And that was the start, the inception. And how do we bring Care Big to life? And then we went out, spoke with all sorts of people across the organizations from all different functions, from all different backgrounds, and asked them how they felt we could bring Care Big to life. And it very quickly became about storytelling. That's the best fuel for your culture. Make it about who and what you already represent, because then you can encapsulate that into something that is meaningful, that people can see already within the organization and give a name to it. And for us, that was Care Big. And beyond that, our culture building behaviors, and that they were designed by our people, for our people, for how they wanted to show up into the organization and how they wanted leaders to show up in the organization. So when we went back to the management team with, we're not coming back with values, we're coming back with culture building behaviors. There's not 10 of them, there's 4 of them. And this is how we want to really bring them to life across our training programs, across the entire life cycle of how people are in the organization. So what does it mean for somebody coming for an interview with us or a discussion about an acquisition with us? What does it mean when we look at managing performance and purpose? What does it mean for somebody who's going to change roles in the organization or is in difficulty in the organization? It has to bring meaning through the entire life cycle. So for us, it was going in all directions and very much sponsored by the leadership team. I would not say created by the leadership team. And that was really the essence of its power. We measure engagement across the organization in a very detailed, very granular way. And during COVID, I think that Sophie also alluded to it, we had our best engagement rate and our lowest turnover rates. So clearly people were staying with the organization because of that culture, because of that purpose. And then on your second question about people quit their manager, I think that is true. If I say in my own experience, I think it was truer or more prominent before COVID. The reasons I've seen people leave during COVID are quite different. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not citing their manager or their leader, but they can also cite other reasons about work-life balance, about family time, about spending time with other people in their lives. The whole notion of prioritization, I think, has changed for many people. And I see a more flavored and a more variability in the reasons why people will choose to leave the organization. It's no longer just about the leader and the manager. Now, that is not to say that our leaders and our managers are not critical in retaining people, that they're not critical in motivating people. That doesn't go away.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead, Cassie.
One thing just on that, it's and to build on what you've both said, I think I'm observing leadership populations more comfortable with talking about their style and how they engage people and being more of the sort of emotional quotient conversation. It's more acceptable. It's part of what we do. People just much more open to it. Actually, as an executive team, we've just done sort of profile. It's called Insights. It's profiles of styles. And I was expecting huge pushback from the team of, I'm not doing that, why am I talking? And everybody's done it. Everybody's done it, and we're going to be talking about it next Monday.
What about their own personal management styles?
It's styles of natural energies and how people naturally interact, collaborate. And I think if one good thing to have come out of this is I would hope that management leadership generally is much more accepting that how you show up is a real leading indicator to how you can motivate, engage, empower, and support your teams and get the best out of them as well. And that's a really core part of leadership, I think.
No, that's a very...
Absolutely. We do a similar exercise we have done for the last 4 years with the top 200, 250 people in the organization. They complete the styles questionnaire. It can dovetail into a cultural questionnaire about how teams interact and collaborate. And I couldn't agree more. I think it is so important to understand how you show up as a leader and how you're, on the contrary to what we learn in leadership school about how your self-style and how others perceive you, they should be similar. In fact, they are really very similar. How you feel and think about showing up and how you actually show up in the organization can be somewhat quite different. And you tap into something really quite magical when you understand what those differences are. So I think any organization, it's really important. And I think it's great that you have this openness from the leaders to do that, to do those styles and to embrace everything that is great about them and everything that's perhaps not so great and that can warrant some more work and some reach out and signal into colleagues to help.
Self-awareness is a very good and important thing for anybody.
If sometimes uncomfortable.
Yes, exactly. It's a difficult thing.
Oh yes, it can hurt a little bit.
Exactly. Well, that brings us perfectly to the end of time. You had a question, but perhaps we don't have time for it, but perhaps you could grab Kirsty, or I'm going to volunteer both Sammy and Sophie. I haven't warned them about this, but you can send them your questions through the app or send them an email, and you'd be happy to chat. I know both of you will, and Kirsty as well. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee, and thank you, panel. That was really fantastic, and so many relevant and practical stories and messages for all of us in different industries to take away. So thank you for that. We have a break now, so we'll see you back here at 5 o'clock for the fertility session. Looking forward to that very much. Enjoy your tea. Thank you.
Dignity. It demands a rapid COVID test because we all deserve an answer. It demands your heart stays connected to your doctor so you know it's beating as it should. And a rapid test to help evaluate concussion in case something were to happen. At Abbott, we fight for these moments, developing life-changing technologies because dignity demands it.
that.
Long room. Would you mind moving up to the front section? Because welcome to this afternoon's final session, which is on fertility, and it's going to be chaired by my colleague David Farbrother, HBI's editor. Just a quick reminder before we start that we are meeting downstairs at 6:30 for the walking bus from here to Church House. Is going to take us all back to our primary school days. It's going to be very, very exciting. So I look forward to seeing you there. David.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Can somebody wave at the back if you can hear me? Hooray.
You should also move to the front a little bit, because you're all quite spread out.
Oh,
There are gold stars being given out for people sitting in the front row, so.
Thanks, folks. Right, so fertility, welcome indeed to the final session of today. Thank you for staying the course, it's appreciated. And what can I say about fertility? Well, it's resilient, it's seen as a safe bet. Investors like it, there's a high element of private pay. It's an area where patients are prepared to spend money. Lots of ticks. But now, during the pandemic, how is supply? How is demand? How viable are pan-European groups? Is bigger always more beautiful? How is the sector being impacted by the digital revolution and the rise of femtech? With me today, I have an expert panel I'm delighted to introduce to answer those questions and more, should you have any. And I'm just checking, yes. So, Carlos is with us. Carlos Blanes Gironès is the Deputy CEO at EV RMA Global. He is an engineer by training, started out as a, and I'm going to stress, pre-Enron business consultant at Arthur Andersen. He then moved to Deloitte, and for the last 15 years has been working in the IVF sector, a stint which saw EV enter the US market and become a world leader in reproductive medicine. Carlos, welcome, and thank you for joining us virtually.
Thank you. Thank you, the organization, for the invitation, and thank you, Dave, for the introduction. It's been a while indeed. Since 15 years ago, I joined EV and saw it grow from 5 to 80 plus clinics right now. And so I'm happy to share part of that experience with you today.
To have you and your international experience, so thank you. Dave Burford is the CEO at Care Fertility Group. His background is as a chartered accountant. He worked at KPMG prior to his current role and says that Care Fertility is his first venture out into the real world. He moved from Group CFO to COO, and 6 months ahead of the group's 2019 sale to Silverfleet, stepped up to be CEO. And he tells me that he's happy to leave the big brains to the medical side of things, but he has strong views on focusing on the customer, something which is often overlooked. And last but by no means least, we have Katia Zubareva. Katia is a healthcare services partner at LEK Consulting. She does a lot of work in clinic services, fertility, dentistry, dermatology. And she's especially passionate about the patient and the clinician proposition and how you cater to them as people. And she's also a strong advocate of patient choice. Splendid.
Sounds about right.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start by looking at where we are today. It's an obvious question, I apologise. We're always going to start with COVID or the after effects of COVID. Let's get through this. How is demand, and indeed, how is supply now during the pandemic, albeit not the worst of it? Dave, I'll come to you first, simply because you're first in line. You're looking straight at me. Dave, you were closed for what, 6-8 weeks? Were you at the height of the pandemic? Or?
Yeah, so the HFEA gave indications that they wanted to wind down business around April time, and made a directive that said we had to cease any new egg collections around the middle of April, and we didn't start up again until about 6 weeks after that. The way that IVF works is there's always a bit of a tail off and a wind up because of the way that drugs and in-treatment cycles work. Thankfully, we didn't have to cancel anything that was started, so there was no patients that were halfway through that got cancelled. So that was great for patients, but obviously there was an awful lot of patients that were about to start and had mentally committed, if not financially committed, to having IVF. So that was a blow to them, and obviously financially for us, we were able to access certain government schemes, but a lot of our cost is fixed, and we pretty much had zero revenue for that period of time.
So that was what, May, June, July, or?
Yeah, so it's sort of half revenues in April, half revenues in July, and then pretty much nothing in between, as things wound back up. But then post that lockdown period, things have come back quite aggressively. So we obviously had pent-up demand of patients that should have been having treatment during that period. We pretty much worked our way through that backlog within the first 6 weeks. So the sort of clinical backlog, if you like. Then there was the pent-up demand of people that would have had consultations during that period. Now, we were able to do consultations remotely through Skype, so we'd not built up such a demand. Again, we'd got through that within sort of 4, 5, 6 weeks. But then it carried on. And so what's been clear to myself, and I'm sure Carlos will have a view, is there's been a mindset change. We're still really busy, and we've grown significantly through the extended period. Through the second lockdown and third lockdown had absolutely no impact on demand. So it's clear that, and from talking to patients and looking at demographic trends like drive times increased and things like this, the move to more digital platform has helped. So pretty much every consultation now is digital. We've actually, some of the COVID measures that we put in place have been actually patient friendly. Yep. And COVID gave us the ability to push those through without resistance from the medical team. So things like being able to do remote blood tests and remote consultations, et cetera, et cetera. So we've seen demand really go well beyond just a catch up. It's a shift really in demand. The caveat to that, and again, I'm sure Carlos will have a view, is in July and August of this year, as the world has opened up, there's definitely been an element of patients getting in touch saying, I was going to have treatment in August, but can I delay it till September, please, because I'd quite like to go on holiday. So we did see a little bit of a drop-off in July and August. And it's hard to compare year on year, because July and August last year was definitely part of the recovery phase, but this year's been quieter. Still above historical trends, but there's definitely been an element of, I was rushing to get this done, but actually now I can go on holiday. I might do it in September and October, but there's been that.
So there are bumps in the road, but generally the trend continues.
Trend
is a strong one.
Definitely upwards, quite significantly upwards, but a bit of a slight dip off in the summer of this year.
Kasia, you're nodding along with this. What's your take?
Yeah. No, I mean that's basically what we hear from pretty much everyone. That if you were closed for some period of time in 2020, you lost that revenue, but then everybody caught up pretty quickly, except for, of course, a few catered to international patients.
Yes.
So that continues to be a major pain, as we
Carlos
can all
shortly,
relate to. Yes, kind of traveling across borders is hard, and then you have to look quite locally, really, at driving from Germany to Czech Republic is easier than flying from UK to Spain or whatever it might be. So
or
those
currently
flows are
getting into the
still
UK from
impacted.
anywhere.
Yes, yes, but hopefully soon to change.
Yeah.
Yes, but otherwise, it's a sector that has always been incredibly resilient through all economic downturns for very obvious reasons. I think if you decide to have a child and you're struggling with that, you will remortgage your house and you will find the money and you will find the time to go through IVF. So it's traded on really well, and I imagine people who were delayed for a period of time wanted to get back into it very quickly. So 2020, from what I hear, overall was quite a good year for fertility, and 2021 is as well. So we'll see if Carlos contradicts us. Hopefully
let's
not.
turn now, to Carlos for the world view. If I can be so bold, you've got much more of an international footprint. How do you see it from over there?
I think Dave perfectly described what has been the situation in the countries with full lockdown. So the dynamics in such countries are exactly like they described. So I fully agree with his analysis. In some countries though, where we didn't have the need to close, because we could argue that those treatments are not eligible. And we haven't seen the deep of these 6 to 8 weeks that they described, but it's true that in most of the countries we have. After that, fully agree, changing patterns, behaviors. I do believe that we are facing a new trend, and world demand is rising everywhere, especially with domestic patients. And as Katia pointed out, basically the only thing that is still to catch up is patients that travel abroad for treatment. We are above pre-COVID numbers almost everywhere, save those patients that have to travel to get a treatment. But so I think I fully agree with both of them.
Basically, am I right in thinking that infertility is up and maternity in certain regions is down? Is that an accurate summary?
Yeah, absolutely. That is why I said that these trends are changing, because we see maternity KPIs going down and fertility KPIs going up. As Dave said, there is this raise in demand coming after the lockdowns in the countries that had that, and in every other country we are seeing big growth in fertility in most of the countries, double figures. So I do believe that is exactly right.
Thank you. Just a reminder for the audience, I don't mind you being on your phones, well, not talking on them, but if you want to look at them, you can access the app. If you access the app, you will see that you can click on this as a live event. You can tap out questions. By the miracle of science, they will appear on this screen in front of me, and they've made it big enough for me to read even with my glasses. So if you don't want to put up your hand, or you want to just ask a question but you want to do it subtly, stick it into the app. It will come up on the screen and I'll find a moment to ask it to the panel. Okay, let's move on now to look at consolidated international groups. The question, the brief that was prepared ahead of this conference was asking about their viability as a business model. I guess the question really is big beautiful? I finished with the last question with you, Carlos. I have to come to you first, obviously, for this one. You're going to tell me big is beautiful and why, but would you like to explain what your view is on that?
Okay, yes, absolutely, yes. Big is beautiful, and I think it is the living proof that we can run this business on an international platform. And the bigger the platform and the stronger the platform, the easiest is, because there are so many things that are common across the different countries. But it's true that science is well ahead of regulation, and although we have consensus among physicians, among practitioners about how we should move this sector ahead and how we should be treating patients, the general guidelines might be get there sometime. But I don't foresee a future unified regulation across the country. So whereas you might have these specific nuances about regulation and some others about what can doctors do or perform in different countries, what nurses can do or perform in different countries, the basics of the fundamentals of the business are the same, and consolidation is possible.
The physicians agree. The politicians don't, and in part that's driven presumably by public sentiment.
I mean, I don't think it's public sentiments, because public or patient, indeed, they travel looking for treatment where they can't find those treatments in their own countries because of regulatory constraints. So I don't think it's public sentiment pushing the politicians, but just I couldn't tell.
That might frame the regulations around which the politicians.
Yeah, it's regulators rather than politicians, I think.
The main things that drive the fertility for tourism is sex selection, and the anonymity or not of donated gametes. They're the two main drivers, and there's just different rules around Europe. And
for example, coming to your embryo selection, Care's fantastic embryo selection.
Thank you.
Ability, but you couldn't do that in Germany, could you?
No, you can't, because the rules in Germany are that embryos have to be selected at a much earlier stage in their development, and so the technology simply wouldn't be applicable. Some of this is science, some of it is religion, to be honest. And in terms of the Catholic countries tend to have a different set of rules to less Catholic countries, and so there's politics, religion at play in all of what we do. But more and more countries are realizing that there is a demographic birth problem, like you've indicated, and IVF is one of the routes out of that problem by offering more mandated treatments and helping people get pregnant, really. So I think some of those boundaries are falling down about what you can and can't do. Some of them are there to stay, I think. But I do agree with much of what Carlos says. I'm not so sure all clinicians are agreed on the future, but there's definitely elements of that. But I think for me, the internationalization piece is one of the word platform is used a lot, but actually it needs to, in my view, there's some groups that have internationalized very well. Evie's one of them. There are some groups that have internationalized pretty poorly. I won't name them right now, but and for me, the difference is having a clear vision of what it is you are trying to do when you're internationalizing, and just simply going out buying a load of clinics will not lead to a happy ending.
Sure, and we may come on to M&A in a second, but these differences, the way that donor treatment works, same-sex couple restrictions, sex selection. Carlos, just to follow up briefly, these don't present problems for you. You deal with things in a different way, but you've still got a centralized base. You can still operate your business. You just need to take account of local regulations. There must be headaches inherent in having a big organization, even if it's with physician acquisition or transfer of knowledge, or there must be some problems there, surely.
Quite honestly, as I said, the fundamentals of the business are quite similar everywhere. The big headache is dealing with doctors. Doctors are very special everywhere, and that is something that they have in common every country that I've visited. So I would say that it's true that we have to use different tools to basically deal with that in the different countries. The amount of money that doctors make in different countries changed a lot, and that affects directly to the way that you can address this business in different countries. But I would say that basically what we need to bear in mind when we practice these treatments in different countries is basically related with regulatory constraints. That is the main factor.
Staff management and culture is the other thing that you need to bear in mind when you're looking at different jurisdictions.
Absolutely. I mean, staffing, that as I said, and I think Dave also mentioned, when you have in a country that nurses that can perform many different procedures, as for example in the UK, the way that you are going to set up the clinic is completely different than the way that you are going to set up the clinic in some other place. But the treatment itself is going to be the same. So that is important when you select staffing And that is also important when you try to recruit and to keep that talented individuals, because most of the key personnel in the clinics are highly educated, highly trained, and basically, if you want to keep them, money is always important, but you will have to put some other things in the table, like professional development, research capabilities, opportunities internationally. But yes, staffing, as you said, is also part of a very important part of this.
Katja, I haven't come to you on this question. Anything
Yeah,
that you want to
yeah.
add?
Well, I think it's an interesting one because you have to think separately about benefits of scale and benefits of internationalization as such, and then international scale is obviously the ultimate prize. But a lot of the benefits you get, as you do in the UK, right, are from local scale. So all your ability to invest in systems and protocols and digital and things like that, your clinical quality and ability to do research and things like that, they come from scale. Your patient recruitment engagement practices, like you can kind of go around all the things that a fertility provider can do well, and scale helps. So if you ever had the choice to be off scale in a single country versus lots of single clinics across Europe, you would always want to be off scale in a single geography.
Brand-led, like both Evie and Care are, because you get the economies of scale of the brand as well as the mechanics of running a group.
But then at some point you run out of space in a single country, and then you want to diversify your revenue, you want to diversify your regulatory risk, you want to have maybe access to clinicians in countries such as Spain where they're more plentiful, or nurses, maybe bring them over to the UK or whichever other country you're in. You maybe want to help your patients travel, you maybe want to take donor eggs or sperm and bring it across borders and things like that, and that's where the international benefits come in. But it's quite an interesting question, I think, in this market in particular, whether big locally is better than small and dispersed, and how quickly can you get to international scale as such. And there are very few organizations that have done the international scale bit, right?
Yeah, we should ask somebody big and local how they feel about this. Dave, how do you feel?
Well, I completely agree with what Katja was just saying. I think we've managed to get many of the benefits of scale, even though we're kind of landlocked into the UK. We've got Dublin as well at the moment, but that's as far as we've gone. But we've got our own proprietary systems. We've got a brand that's consistent. We train all of our own embryologists. We have now started to train all of our own doctors as well. So you can get those things within a country. What we've not got that Evie have got is the ability to de-risk the regulatory point that Katja says. Now, we're not particularly exposed to it in the UK because 99% of our patients are from the UK. So we don't have this risk of the government changing the rules and all of a sudden we lose a load of patients, which some countries do have, where they're reliant on inbound tourism. But nevertheless, internationalisation would give a broader portfolio. The other thing we'd get with just even increased scale is more pure research and development. We're very, very good at the moment, but the bigger you get, the more you can just pour into that. And we've demonstrated through Care Maps that you mentioned earlier, but also some AI products that we're developing now, that you can really, and I know we'll come on to that later, but we can really monetize these products and really improve patient success through these products. So it's a win-win, but you have to sort of earn the right to do that through scale and money.
Yeah, you mentioned training by choice or training out of necessity, because that's the way that you get the right staff.
Both.
If we could train all of our staff, we would.
Right.
There's certain regulations around what you can and cannot train with doctors, and so you have to sort of go cap in hand to the ROCG to get their permission to train, and if we were allowed to do it, you definitely would. I think every group would train their own staff if they could, but there are challenges of doing so. So it's more a case of recruitment out of necessity rather than train out of necessity. We can recruit. We don't struggle to recruit, but you are better off training your own if you can. So embryologists, we generally train all of our own embryologists.
That said, staff are your most precious resource, presumably.
Yes.
How do you keep them on message? How do you keep them happy?
I think Carlos touched on this slightly. It depends on which cohort of staff you're looking at. Generalising, embryologists and doctors are motivated generally by research, development and progressing themselves clinically and scientifically. Nurses and administrative people, which actually make up the bulk of the staff, are less motivated by that, but not, it's obviously not black and white in each case. So we put a lot of effort into having our own training programs, our own abilities to grow as an individual. We're fortunate in the UK, as Carlos said, that we actually can have pretty much any healthcare professional do pretty much any part of our journey. So what that means is if you've got a really ambitious nurse, then we can train them up to do egg collections, embryo transfers, prescribing, any part of the journey that you can imagine. Embryology is completely unlocked. You can do any part of it. So that really helps us in the UK. It's less like that in many foreign jurisdictions, so that you're more restricted, but that's generally how we motivate.
And you've got a stable lab business, so within that, you have the ability to put people through that system as well, presumably. Yeah,
we recruit around, we train around 12 to 13 new recruits every year. So we're behind the NHS. We're by far and away the biggest trainer of new embryologists. And we can do that because we've got the scale, but also we've got the consistency. So all of our labs pretty much do everything in exactly the same way across the group. So an embryologist is actually quite good at moving around. If we move on from Birmingham to Nottingham, they quite like it. So it's really flexible. When you go to other cohorts, not so flexible. Getting a doctor go from even Nottingham to Sheffield, which is a 30-mile ride, is pretty difficult. Yeah. But yeah, it's horses for courses. But the consistency piece, coming back to that platform, is the critical bit, because we can have a doctor that can do a consultation on Skype for Tunbridge Wells the same as they could do it for Manchester, because everything around them is pretty much the same. If you've not got that consistency, there's no chance that you could do that, because they simply wouldn't be able to talk the language of that local clinic and it would break down.
Carlos, any thoughts on happy staff? Anything to add to what you said before?
No, I think Dave complemented perfectly. It's exactly like that. You have doctors more motivated by research and investigation and lower educated staff motivated by all things. I hear some return. Oh, now it's better. So I think that's pretty much it. I do agree that training them and providing them with more ability to grow in the professional career is what most where you have the ability to keep them most and give new challenges to the ones that really want to grow. And as Dave was saying, we train. We have IBI is related with the university, and we have master's degrees in gynecology and in embryology. So we do not only train our own staff, but we do train the community, and that gives us the ability to recruit in the future. So and it's another part of the thing. We have our own staff going to educational programs and being part of those professors, and that also motivates a lot the senior people.
Thank you. It's interesting. Kathy, you talked about benefits and pitfalls of internationalization. How prevalent are things like cross-country clinician collaborations? Is that something that's on your radar?
It is. There should be more of it, I think, is the simple answer, because a lot of the international platforms are trying to have clinicians and embryologists actually talk across borders on a regular basis. It's not as straightforward as it should be, but much helped, I suspect, by COVID and us all getting onto Zoom and Teams and things like that. So there's, the kind of the physical barrier, friction of having to travel in order to get together and discuss something has been removed somewhat. So yes, there is generally a theme, I think, and I'm hoping I'm not going to offend anyone, Carlos in particular, by saying this, but even the bigger international platforms, there is still quite a long way to go in terms of becoming perfect in, you know, hitting all of these internationalization benefits and scale benefits.
Why?
Across borders. Just not yet. I think it's just not yet. I think we're all on a journey as an industry. Some people are starting from a single country, some people are starting from multiple countries and building up scale in those geographies, but it's just quite a young industry, right?
The industry's only 30 years old, really. And
yeah, so we are, and honestly, when, so one of my favorite anecdotes, so when first time we worked with CARE, Simon Fischel, who is one of the founders of IVF, right, one of the people who were there at the first IVF baby's birth, sort of, or conception rather, probably not birth, realistically, hopefully, yeah. But he would answer emails personally, patient emails, right? He had this email Simon service. This is 10 years ago, maybe even less, actually, and patients would email him and he would personally reply. And that's not a scalable thing, you know, you have to move away from that at some point. So the industry is quite young. We're very much moving from clinician kind of relationship for the patient to the patient having a relationship with the brand, be it Evie or CARE, and trusting the brand, and then seeing different clinicians or different nurses or different embryologists on any given day and not fretting about that. So we're all, it's just a journey. It's just not yet. It's the next decade is about scale and really reaping all of those scale benefits, I think, just not there yet.
That's interesting. Email Simon. I suspect that we're a way away from call Carlos from where we are at the moment. That's not a recommendation. Let's move on to M&A during COVID. Let's talk about how busy things are. Let's talk about prices. I'm going to turn to Carlos again because, forgive me, Carlos, but you've got the biggest checkbook. So, what's your reading of the situation? How is M&A for you?
Well, I think it's busy at this moment. I don't really think it's related to the pandemic. I think it's more related to other factors. For example, in the US, you have a common tax regulation changes that is pushing many investors and many physicians to sell practices because they will be facing new tax implications in the coming future. But I do believe that now is more related with the first and second cycle of investors coming into this sector. As Dave was saying before, this is a young sector. It's just 30 years ago. So it's still to come, the consolidation, and PE funds started to get in 10 years ago, more or less, 10 years, 5 years, most of them. So I think it's more related with this first, second cycle of private equity coming in and investors coming in than the pandemic itself. So it is very busy, but I wouldn't blame the pandemic for this one.
Katia, fertility, hot or not?
Oh, very. Has been hot for many years now.
Tell us more.
I think the question is, there are two questions again. One is platform acquisitions, right? And there are lots of people in this room with a green lanyards who are very keen on the sector and have been for many years. So I think that is a very hot subject.
I can see them smiling in agreement when I look out to the audience. So that's a yes.
They're trying to not too vigorously.
They're not giving it away. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, poker face and all that. And then a separate question, but also an important one, is roll-ups, right? And how much more there is to be done in roll-ups. And the markets are still remarkably fragmented. Even in the UK, where you have CARE and the fertility partnership, there is still plenty more to be done, actually. So I don't know, is the honest answer, whether roll-ups have been more or less, like single clinic acquisitions have been more or less active in the last 18 months. But it feels like it's been plowing on as an industry, as if nothing happened really, bar a bit of confusion in April and May. Let's just call it that.
Just to reiterate both of those 2 points, really, there's two kind of tiers of acquisition. There's the clinic change, which is what both Carlos and Katia said, and then you've got the single clinic, and they're very, very different acquisitions. The single clinics are typically, because of the age of the industry, the original founders of a clinic that was founded in the 90s. And you now get into a phase where they want to retire, essentially, and there's not a natural progression of that. They're not selling to other doctors. I'm not aware of another single clinic in the UK that's sold from one doctor to another doctor. They're all being sold to chains. And that's what's going on in the States right now, huge consolidation into platforms. But then you've got the next tier up, which are platforms buying other platforms. And that's only really just started in the last 2 or 3 years at any great scale. And that's the point Carlos was making about the age of the private equity influence of the sector.
Yeah. And deals create an atmosphere, they breed more deals, they breed positivity sometimes. Is that what we're looking at here?
I think certainly an element of that. I mean, I can only speak with great confidence in the UK, but there's certainly an element of, I talk to doctors and they say, well, we know we're going to get acquired by somebody and we'd rather it be care. And it's almost that attitude of, we know this is coming and actually we love the care model, we'd like to come with care. And so, yes, I think that's because they can see everything else consolidating around them and it's the obvious way to go.
Is there any elements, as in, I mean, dentistry is an extreme example really for me to pick, but you look at small practitioners, they've been frightened by the pandemic, they want the umbrella protection of a big corporation or help getting PPE or just the security that being part of a bigger organisation brings. Is there any element of that with the smaller buys that you're looking at? Are people coming and knocking on your door as a result
Definitely,
of this?
I think from all angles, regulatory-wise, even in the short time, I've been in IVF 7 years, even in that period, we've gone from when the HFEA turn up from it being one person to it being a team of 6 people now that turn up to inspect your clinic with a big long list of things. So governance-wise, it's only going in one direction, but also the market's sophisticated. Now compared to what it was. You go back 5-10 years and a doctor could run the entire clinic from a marketing point of view because really there was no sophistication in the marketplace. Now a doctor needs to focus on the doctoring because the rest of the package that you've got to deliver to customers, the customer care, customer service, the marketing, the strategy is being done by people that specialize in that. So if you're a standalone clinic run by a doctor, it's highly unlikely you can compete in that marketplace, and that's increasingly the case.
Well, and there is a general healthcare theme, I think, which is a lot wider than fertility, very much in dentistry, very much in dermatology, etc. Is a bit of a generational change in how people want to work, and it's partly gender, more women in the workforce, partly millennials, and wanting to have a life, which I can totally relate to. So people want to work part-time, people want to be able to take some time off and not fear for the fate of the clinic, right? Absolutely. So there is just a general kind of shift towards maybe I don't want to be the boss, maybe I want to have some cover in case of a crisis or in case I want to take a couple of months off and go traveling or whatever it might be. So I think there is, and that is very consistent across geographies, across healthcare sectors, pretty much, or social care for that matter. So it's a theme that helps the corporates, I think. Oh, a question. You said we would be able to see it.
Do you know?
Not so much.
When I was in this room this morning, they adjusted this for
bigger.
my eyes. Somebody better with better eyes. Right. Do you see pushback from public health services who end up caring for preterm twins and triplets? And if so, how will you manage that in the future?
It's probably one for me, this, because it sounds like a
it's
UK-centric
question, but also an age-old one, isn't it?
It's one that's a little, no offence to the person asking the question, it's a little bit out of date, really, insofar as it was a big problem within the sector, and the UK has probably got one of the best records in the world at reducing multiple births, and that largely came through just reporting. There was no hard and fast rule introduced, and there was no directive, no sanctions placed on any of the clinics, but just simply reporting multiple birth rates for each clinic and then constantly having to ask the question, our care's multiple birth rate, and we're roughly 20% of the UK market is about 6% multiple birth rate. Well, the multiple birth rate de novo in the population is around 2-3%. So it's no longer anywhere near the problem that it was in the UK. I can't speak for outside of the UK. Carlos might be able to comment on that.
Yes, I think I agree with you, Dave. Indeed, we've been trying to push the administration to go into a single embryo transfer compulsory for the clinics, because that is going to be the gold standard of practicing IVF. as Dave was saying, we are happily now in the multiple rate of the natural conceptions. We are below 3% multiple rate right now in EV, and we are mostly single embryo transfer. We do not do any more double embryo transfer in any of our clinics. So, and I think if we could get the regulation body to change the rules so that we could only do single embryo transfer, that would help everyone practice. It will help the patient. It will lower the risk for patients. It will lower the expenses for the public system, because both, for example, in Spain is likewise in the UK, private clinics perform IVF treatments, but then the pregnant woman goes to the public sector, and all the expenses on ICU for babies is paid by the public. So I think everyone will win by changing the regulatory into a single embryo transfer, and I do believe that is no longer a problem in well run clinics as care as EV is, but is still a problem in many other places, and there are countries that are way behind us. So it's still something to be pursued, and we need to work everywhere to pursue the single embryo transfer.
That's very interesting. I'm going to pause for a second. I want to come on to digital, probably as the last question. I'm aware that we've got just over 10 minutes left, but I am encouraged to look at the audience and see if anybody actually has a question they want to ask. Is anybody sitting on, I see a hand. If you pause, I see two hands, great. If you pause for a second, there's a microphone speeding to you.
So hello everyone, my name is Anni Isomustervi. I'm from Finland, from Be Healthy Mehiläinen, and apparently you're just coming to the topic of digital. And you all have your books full, so apparently like customer experience is not like the first critical factor you have ahead of you. But still, I'm a bit curious to hear, because kind of based on our experiences in our fertility clinics, kind of we have been able to mitigate the factor of like the person dependency with the digital engagement platform what we created, and kind of also increase the patient satisfaction simultaneously, because then they can communicate easily and get the kind of support all the time through the app and their personal materials there and their personal health plan. But I was just thinking that what role do you see kind of in digitalization in the fertility treatments?
You've stolen my next question, but it was beautifully put and far better than I could have done. Dave, do you want to field that first? I know you're interested in digital. You're interested in AI particularly as well, aren't you? But as a completely separate subject. But the whole digital world excites you.
Yeah, I think Katya's point will be, don't run before you can walk, I think, on the AI, because there is an awful lot of clinics, and, care is not perfect at this, that need to go through the journey that you've just described, which is, this is a largely private pay sector, and in some clinics and in some organisations, it still acts a bit like the NHS. And actually, there's a customer here that's about to pay £6,000 to £10,000, and they need to be treated in that way. And there's a journey that IVF is going on through apps and through customer service training and all sorts, to move away from this is pure medical to being actually this is a customer service organisation. So digital has got a huge part to play in that, because you can actually turn something that's quite labour intensive into something that can be actually answered better 24/7 through a quite clever FAQ app style chatbot type approach. And I think we're all working on solutions for that. Some are more advanced than others. On the other end of the digital spectrum is AI, where there's such potential for AI in the sector. The best clinics in the world, some claim 80% success rates, don't believe it. The best success rates really are around 50-60%. So there's an awful lot of patients that have treatment that pay the £6,000 to £10,000 and fail. And there's masses of data out there, and so huge potential for applying AI to that data to improve success rates. But also, in the Care Maps one that I talked about earlier is a prime example where it's not just about pure research. You can monetize this, and patients want to pay the extra because they want the latest technology, and it's real. You know, it improves success rates by 10-15%.
Sure.
So yeah, huge potential.
Carlos, can I come to you with the same question? Forgive me, I'm going to ask you to keep it short, sort of a minute or two, because I know there's another question in the audience I'd love to come to before we finish.
Okay, so coming back to basically telehealth and digitalization, I would say that if you make the question who is driving the digitalization in the companies, it's not the CEO, it's not the CIO, it's COVID. COVID brought telehealth right there, everywhere. And depending on the cultural adjustments in different countries, and it's very, I mean, I'm from Spain, we are Latin, and it's different. I mean, everyone wants to see their doctor, but if you go to other countries, as the attendee described, and as we have, for example, in the UK, some clinics that are 100% virtual. We have clinics that are in the US that are 100% virtual from the consultation standpoint, as Dave mentioned before. It's true, we are going to face differences among countries again for the cultural standpoint, but everyone needs to work on this because telehealth is here to stay, and we'll see part of this internationalization on telehealth that Katia mentioned before that is going to be related to this after the regulation is settled, because regulation is also a problem for that. But yes, this is here to stay.
Now, of course, with 5 minutes to go, the questions are flooding in. There's a question from the front. Do you still want to ask your question?
So first of all, thank you for a very engaging and interesting discussion. My question is about how you would characterize the innovation landscape more broadly outside of digitization. For someone who is a little bit naive about the sector, what are your thoughts on that?
Katia, do you want to field that first?
I can try. Yeah, I think there is a lot in clinical, and there is a lot of research and things that are being done, AI included, that improve outcomes. There is a thing on kind of the borderline between digital and not really. Don't know if to call it digital, but thinking about which parts of the patient pathway can actually be done at home. I get very excited about this part. So handheld ultrasound scanners on your phone, pretty much, is a thing. They're cheap and cheerful and available, and nobody's using them to track patient cycles at home, right? And I think there is probably more technology that I'm not aware of that exists and is cheap and cheerful enough. Can any testing be done at home? Can any... I mean, there are things around patient engagement, such as video consent and things like that can be done at home, but you can probably move quite a large chunk of the number of patient trips to the clinic, free up the staff, save costs, and everybody wins type situation, which I think is potentially the next frontier there, and that is quite exciting. Don't know if that's digital or not.
I'd say as well, there's an awful lot of potential within femtech, and the main potential for fertility is not a direct revenue stream itself, but it's to widen the funnel, where we know that despite the fact that fertility is actually quite accessible in a lot of countries, there's still thousands and thousands of couples that are going through infertility without support. And a lot of that is a bit of ignorance and a bit of we don't know what to do. And it's actually quite scary and expensive to book a £600 going into a clinic and having a consultation. You've got to admit that you've got a problem, you've got to go and see a doctor. But actually, if you can just monitor this at home with a little bit of technology, the doctors might frown upon it because frankly it won't make a difference to their treatment. They're not going to change their lives, the doctors' lives. But actually it could be a massive enabler for people that don't access treatment right now that should be accessing treatment and simply don't access it through either fear or ignorance, essentially. So huge potential in femtech.
Carlos, and sorry to put pressure on you, do you have a 60-second response to this?
I would say that I do agree with Dave. Femtech, in my opinion, is going to be mainly increasing the awareness of fertility across the board, so that will help both patients and businesses. I don't see direct application probably in the clinic, but I do see femtech increasing the awareness, certainly. And Katia, I agree. I mean, self-monitoring and treatment at home is going to be there. We are, for example, we are working on that. We are developing technology to do that, and is going to be an option in the future for sure. And beyond that, I would say application on genetics and IVF. That's a huge opportunity, and genetics is going to be where most of the new kind of treatments are going to be developed in relation with IVF, because I don't see new techniques coming in, but I do see genetic applications helping in treatments and helping also in research, and for sure playing a main role in the development of AI technologies.
Thank you for such a succinct answer. Brilliantly, we have one question left. Joe Ryan, CFO of Medicover, has asked it, and it's phrased in a way that can be answered with a yes or no answer, which I like, particularly when I'm looking at 1 minute left on the clock. The question is this: do you see further reimbursement support from governments for fertility treatments? Examples being Israel with virtual unlimited support, against the UK with restrictions and variability. So further reimbursement support from governments for fertility treatments. There isn't a time frame assigned to that. Let's say over the next 3 years, 4 years.
It's really not a yes or no answer, I'm afraid. It's kind of depends
on
the country answer. Yeah,
I'll take a maybe.
I mean, it really massively depends on the country. In the UK, can you see more money from the government?
Not
no,
in the
me
UK.
neither.
Not with pressures on the house.
In France, as they lift restrictions on who can access IVF, single women, same-sex couples, etc. Yeah. By definition, they will become eligible for the funding, which is already available in France. So that kind of creates additional funding. I'm sure in some other countries it will move in that direction as well. But it's very, very territory specific.
And just to put a lot of pressure on our colleague overseas, 10 seconds, yes or no, Carlos?
No. No, I don't see more funding coming in. I do see, as Katia was mentioning, in France, more patients getting eligible to the treatment, but I don't see more money coming in.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you particularly to Carlos for dialing in, because I can thank our panelists here in person.
No, apologies. I would have loved to be there, but I couldn't. So apologies for this.
That concludes the session. I'd just like to say thank you and appreciate my fantastic panel. Thank you very much.
It's a great session to end the day with. So as earlier advertised, very excitingly, I've just received the list of canapes that are going to be served at Church House. And believe me, it is worth going for. So if Jeremy Hunt isn't, the champagne and the canapes definitely. So the walking bus leaves at 6:30. That is our driver there. Ruben, do you want to give us a wave? Look, that is the walking bus driver. He is going to lead us over the bridge to Church House, where we will have a lovely time. So I look forward to seeing you downstairs in about half an hour.
Dignity. It demands a rapid COVID test because we all deserve an answer. It demands your heart stays connected to your doctor so you know it's beating as it should. And a rapid test to help evaluate concussion in case something were to happen. At Abbott, we fight for these moments, developing life-changing technologies because dignity demands it.